Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. We like to take all this information from a bunch of different sources, so you don't have to kind of wade through it all.
Right.
It's like your shortcut to what really matters.
I like that. A shortcut.
Yeah. And today we are diving into all this material you sent over about making work, more consistent.
Yeah.
And hopefully more effective, more productive.
Definitely. And you've given us some really interesting stuff here.
Yeah.
Talking about documenting work and consistently applying it, standardized work.
Right.
It seems like it can make a really big difference in a lot of industries.
Absolutely.
And there's even a case study in here.
Oh, yeah.
From precision tech manufacturing.
Precision tech.
Yeah, and some data from places like the Lean Enterprise Institute.
Okay.
And Deloitte. So some pretty reputable sources.
Nice. So our goal today is to kind of pull out the core ideas here.
Yeah.
About standardized work.
Uh-huh.
And how it impacts productivity, quality.
Yeah.
And just overall business performance.
That sense.
Yeah. And all this tailored for you, our lovely listeners.
Of course.
Now, this is a Karas Innovations Group production.
Wonderful.
And our executive producer and founder is Lenier Johnson.
Excellent.
And you are listening to Season 1, Episode 4. So jumping right into it, what does standardized work even mean?
Right. So the way your material defines it, it sounds like it means having those work processes not only clearly defined, but also formally documented, written down.
Right, yeah.
And they actually use this documentation as the set way of doing things.
Okay.
They're standard.
So it's like creating that solid base, foundation.
Yeah.
For how work gets done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the main idea, I think, behind all of this is consistent execution.
Consistent execution.
Right. Because the thinking is if everyone's doing the same thing, the same well thought out process,
right,
then you're going to get consistent results.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's like if you don't have the consistency, then it's really hard to measure and manage, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, you can't improve what you can't measure.
Yeah.
And if you don't have any standards, how do you even know what you're measuring against?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things that stood out to me in the materials was without standards, you can't measure or manage effectively.
Yeah.
It's like imagine trying to track your progress.
Yeah.
But you don't even know where you started.
Right. I get it.
It just makes it so much harder to see what's working, what's not working.
Absolutely.
So speaking of things not working, this precision tech manufacturing case study.
Yes.
They were having some real problems.
What kind of problems?
Well, precision tech, they make aerospace components.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So, really high stakes stuff.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And they were dealing with inconsistent product quality. Their rework costs were just like going through the roof. And their production cycle times were all over the place.
Oh, so it sounds like they knew things weren't going well.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have a grasp on why or how to fix it.
Yeah, it sounds like they had some good practices,
Okay.
like unofficially, but
okay, so like tribal knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But it wasn't written down. And so it wasn't consistent.
Yeah, I see.
Like different teams, different shifts, they were all doing things a little differently.
Right.
And that just it created all this variability,
And without that documented standard you were saying, it sounds like it was really hard for the supervisors to actually identify the root cause of these problems.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like everyone knows a shortcut, but nobody's mapped out the main route.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so they precision tech, they recognized that they had this problem, and they decided to implement this like plant-wide initiative.
Okay.
To document their work processes.
All right. So how did they do that? I mean, what did that look like in practice?
So it was really a team effort.
Okay.
Like they brought people together from different departments, these cross-functional teams,
right,
to really map out all the key processes, from the beginning, like machine setup, all the way to the final inspection.
Wow, so end to end.
Yeah, and they made like super detailed instructions.
Okay.
For each task,
Right.
like, step by step.
Got it.
It wasn't just, some vague outline.
No, it was the nitty-gritty, right?
Exactly, yeah.
The recipe.
So they took their recipe, the tribal knowledge,
Yeah.
and they made it official.
Okay, so they got it all down. They have this beautiful document.
Right.
What did they do next? I mean, how did they make sure people actually used it?
Well, they made sure that the instructions were accessible.
Okay.
Like they posted them right at the workstation, so operators could just see them easily.
Yeah, okay.
They also they integrated the procedures into their training programs.
Right.
So new employees, they learned the right way from the start.
Yeah, build those habits early.
Exactly. And supervisors, they started using checklists
Okay.
during their shift reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't just, about checking boxes.
Right, right.
But it was to make sure people were actually following the standards, but also to get feedback.
Okay. From the team.
Yeah.
About how to potentially make things better.
Yeah. So that feedback loop seemed really key.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Standardized work. It's not about making rules that never change.
Right.
It's a living document. You have to keep refining it.
Yeah. Based on what you see, what's working.
Exactly.
So, what about the results?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? I mean, did all this effort actually pay off?
Well, the text describes the results as compelling, and they are.
Okay.
So in just 90 days.
90 days.
Yeah, 90 days, they saw a 14% increase in their first pass yield.
Wow.
Which means, less defects.
Got it.
Less rework.
Yeah. Okay. So right out of the gate, better quality.
Exactly. And they reduced rework hours by 18%.
That's huge.
And their production cycle times went down 10%.
Okay. So faster, better, cheaper.
That's it. That's the goal, right?
That's the trifecta.
So, yeah, pretty significant gains in just 3 months.
It really is. And I think it just goes to show that having that consistent baseline we talked about, it can make a real difference. So was there any indication in the materials, like why they saw these improvements so quickly?
Yeah, so the text says that these documented standards, they gave them a way to see the bottlenecks in their processes.
Okay.
Once they had a picture of the ideal workflow, it was much easier to spot where things were getting held up.
Right.
Or where there was too much variation.
Yeah, so it wasn't just about doing things the same way every time, but it also gave them like the information they needed to make targeted improvement.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Now, the case study also mentions some other things that I think are really important. Beyond the numbers, the productivity gains, it sounds like it had a pretty big impact on the culture.
The culture, yeah.
How did standardizing work affect the employees?
Well, the employees, they felt more confident in their work.
Okay.
Because they knew they were following, the best practices.
Yeah.
They knew they were doing things the right way.
Right.
And that was backed up by leadership.
So it took away some of the guesswork.
Yeah, and the ambiguity.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were having to, reinvent the wheel every time.
Right.
And for the supervisors, it was easier to coach people.
Yeah, because now there was a clear standard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And even cross training.
Oh, interesting.
Got a lot easier because there was this common framework.
Yeah.
For understanding different roles and tasks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the precision tech story, it's a really good example of how taking the time to document the processes and apply them consistently.
Yeah.
Not only, helps the bottom line.
Yeah.
But also creates a more engaged and efficient workforce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the text, it says that just by getting everyone on the same page about how work should be done, they set themselves up for long-term success.
Yeah.
Long-term operational excellence.
Right.
And growth and productivity.
No, I know we've been talking a lot about this one company, but your sources make it clear that these benefits, they're not limited to just precision tech or even just aerospace.
Yeah.
This is something that we're seeing across many industries.
Yeah, for sure. And the Lean Enterprise Institute, they have some pretty interesting numbers about this.
Okay.
So they found that companies that use this well-documented standard work, they see up to a 30% improvement in process stability.
Wow.
And a 25% reduction in variability.
So basically, things become a lot more predictable.
Yeah, and the quality goes up.
Yeah.
So that's a huge impact, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like leaders in manufacturing are really starting to see the value in this.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not just a nice to have anymore.
Yeah.
It's essential
Yeah.
for quality, efficiency,
Yeah.
and keeping costs down.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, so we've talked a lot about manufacturing, but what about other industries? You know, like engineering or supply chain?
Right, yeah.
How does standardized work fit in there?
So for engineering, there's research from Deloitte
Okay.
that found that firms that document their processes, you know, things like design reviews, prototyping,
Yeah.
testing, they can reduce rework by 20%.
Wow.
Which on a complex engineering project, you know, that's a lot of time and money saved.
Absolutely. And it also ensures that nothing gets missed.
Yeah.
Right? That everybody's following the same high standards.
Exactly. And even in supply chain, you know, which
Yeah, it feels like supply chain is all about variability, right?
yeah, but even there, having those standard workflows, you know, for things like managing inventory,
Yeah.
order picking, shipping,
Yeah.
it's been shown to improve order accuracy by 15%
Okay.
and reduce delivery delays.
Wow. Okay. So those are real benefits.
Yeah, and it's not just about, you know, creating the document.
Right.
It's about actually enforcing it.
Yeah, making sure people use it.
Yeah, through audits, you know, coaching, digital tools.
It's interesting to see how these principles of standardization are being used in places you wouldn't necessarily think of,
Right.
like marketing or
Yeah.
service industries.
Yeah, it is interesting. And in those areas, you know, standardization, it's not just about efficiency.
Right.
It's also about improving the customer experience.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for example, McKinsey found that marketing teams that document their processes and set quality standards,
Yeah.
they can improve their speed to market by 18%.
Wow. That's a big advantage.
Yeah, it is. And then in service organizations,
Yeah.
you know, having those standard operating procedures, SOPs, for things like client interactions, issue resolution,
Yeah.
it's been linked to a 12% improvement in customer satisfaction.
Interesting. So it's not about, you know, making everything robotic.
No, right.
It's about making sure every customer has a good experience.
Yeah, it's about consistency.
Yeah, consistency. Yeah.
And high quality.
Okay. So we've seen that standardized work is making a difference across a lot of different industries.
Yeah.
What do you think the future holds for standardized work?
Well, it seems like there's a big shift towards using technology
Okay.
to make these practices even better.
Yeah.
So we're seeing more digital work instructions,
Okay.
real-time dashboards,
Right.
and even digital tools to help with audits.
Yeah, I can see that. It makes things more accessible, gives you more feedback, and it lets you use data to make sure standards are being followed and improved.
Exactly. And the text actually ties this in with Industry 4.0
Okay.
and lean management.
Right. So it's all about using data to make better decisions, reduce variation,
Yeah.
build those high-performing teams.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we wrap this up, what are the big takeaways here for our listeners?
Well, I think the core idea is that standardized work, it creates consistency. You know, how work is done.
Right.
And that consistency, it lets you measure things.
Yeah.
Which then helps you improve things.
Okay. So consistent work leads to measurement.
Yeah.
Measurement leads to improvement.
Exactly.
We've seen that it can have a big impact on businesses.
Yeah.
You know, from productivity to quality,
Yeah.
even to the culture of the company.
Exactly.
And I mean, this isn't just for one type of business.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing or engineering or
Supply chain.
supply chain, or even if your work is more service oriented.
Yeah, it's all about creating that reliable way of working
Right.
that everyone understands and can follow.
Okay.
And that frees people up to innovate.
To think about how to do things even better.
Yeah, exactly.
So, this has been a Karas Innovations Group production.
Yes, it has.
And thank you to our executive producer and founder, Lanier Johnson.
That's the least.
This was season 1, episode 4 of the Deep Dive.
And as you're listening to this, I want you to think about your own work.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you do, where could you document a few key processes
Right.
and maybe unlock some improvements.
Yeah, what's one small step you could take for standardizing things?
Yeah.
That's something to really think about.
Yeah, it is. This has been The Deep Dive.
This has been a Karas Innovations Group production. Thank you again to Lanier Johnson. This has been Season 1, Episode 4 of The Deep Dive.